各位正在收看《看看新闻》直播的各位观众，大家好。那现在呢，我们是在外滩。今天我们看到啊，这里有一个最新的展览正在进行，这是威廉·韦格曼先生的最佳模特儿的这样一个摄影艺术展。大家是不是跟我一样很好奇，这个最佳模特儿究竟是谁呢？我们今天请到了韦格曼先生和他一同来创作这些作品的非常重要的一名艺术家 John Rutter 先生。那他呢会和我们一起来看这次的展览，也和大家来做一下介绍。让我们一起来跟他问好吧。Hello, John. Nice to meet you. Welcome to Shanghai.
Thank you. Thank you.
So here now we are at the Fosun Foundation. Can you tell us why, what makes you decide to have this exhibition with Fosun Foundation?
Well, we've been working to have a studio, a Polaroid studio in Shanghai since 2020. And with COVID and all the other delays, it's been a long time. So finally, this is the first step of really being able to do things. And so my friend Jesse Lin, who owns the camera here, had been trying to get some kind of exhibit, maybe a group exhibit of Polaroids. And finally, we sort of settled on Bill Wegman, William Wegman to everyone, who I've known for 40 years. I've worked with Bill for a very, very long time. And so Bill kind of trusted my judgment, and I said, this place is really great. And so this all came together very, very quickly in less than 2 months, which is extraordinary to pull together an exhibit of this kind in such a short period of time. So we're very excited that it's finally happening.
Okay, so you've been working with William Wegman, and you call him Bill.
Yeah, he likes Bill.
Yeah, for a long time.
Right.
And this is one of his most famous art pieces, right?
Yeah, well, an enlargement, of course, much bigger than the real piece there. So it's actually...
Let us show this piece first. Let the cameraman to film this piece, and actually we can see the real one inside
Exactly.
the exhibition.
Yeah, it does scale up quite well, doesn't it, from the 20 by 24? So yeah, I hadn't seen it till we came yesterday, so I was a little taken aback at how impressive it looks on the side of a building. I'm sure Bill will love it too.
So it must be very difficult to take such a big photo.
It is. The camera, which we'll see shortly, is 5 feet tall, weighs 260 pounds or so. So it's quite a large instrument to actually work with. And so very slow process, a little difficult at times. It's a little fussy. It has its own idiosyncrasies when you work with it. So, but it's something that we, have worked with for so long, Bill and I together, that we pretty much got it down after quite a while.
Okay, so let's walk in and have a look at some of the masterpieces.
Okay.
So how long have you been working with Will?
I started working with him in 1981, and we kind of worked all the way through to about 2008, and that's when Polaroid, the original Polaroid, went out of business, and so it sort of put a pause on the program for a while. We obviously continued, but Bill had sort of moved on to working in other mediums by then. So, and this show actually is a mixture of 2 different mediums. It's the original Polaroids that we did together, and then the later imagery is done with a Hasselblad digital camera, and these are pigment prints done from those. So they're a little bit different in terms of that same subject matter, but a different process.
Okay, now we are at the reception area of this exhibition. So we can see the title, and also 2 main digital pieces.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And so it's interesting for me because I hadn't seen these prints ever. I've only seen his digital work like in reproductions and things. And so they're actually quite beautiful. As one who made the Polaroids, I have no jealousy over the digital prints. They're quite beautiful as well.
But to be honest, we like the classic ones.
Well, I do, yeah. So that's my thing is Polaroids. So, but if Bill likes it, I like it, though. So it makes him happy to keep working.
So let's move on
Sure.
and see some of the digital
Yeah.
photos here.
So
Can you tell us your personal stories about pets? Do you raise pets?
I have cats. I've had cats my whole life, but I had dogs growing up, so I love dogs. I love Bill's dogs. There was always like a little family, because once he had Faye, the original dog, she gave birth to a litter of puppies, and 3 of them continued to work with Bill. So there'd be 4 dogs that would come on a daily shoot that when we would work with. And we'd be together a lot, and so it was almost like an extended family, that the dogs would take over the couch in the studio, and we'd all have to sit somewhere else. So they were the priority when they would come in. And they were just really great animals, really lovely animals. Weimaraners are, trained to be hunting dogs, so they like to take direction, and they like to work. You know, they're working dogs and that sort of thing. And they really take on the sort of characteristic traits of their owner. Bill is a very calm, you know, sort of in the moment presence, and so his dogs kind of picked up on that. I had a couple of puppies that were given to some of my assistants, and they were very different animals, much more high-strung, so they really take on the personality characteristics of the owner, you know. So Bill, very calm, and that's perfect for making photos.
Okay. Probably I need to speak something to our audience in Chinese to tell them they can actually carry pets to this exhibition. Is that okay?
Right, yeah. Yes, exactly.
那其实呢，在这个展览当中啊，也请我们的摄像老师呢，给大家可以在这些照片当中啊游走一下，看一看。那因为现在我们看到的这些作品呢，全部都是我们说的数码照片啊。但是呢，我身边的这位 John 先生呢，他其实最早的时候是伴随着韦格曼先生创作了非常多的经典的这个胶片的作品，也是20×24的这个经典画幅的这些作品。那这个展览呢，非常的特别在于呢，首先第一，它是寻找到了这些非常棒的最佳模特啊，这些狗狗们来作为了照片的主体啊，他们的拍摄的主体的模特。那同时呢，在这个展览当中啊，我们还会鼓励大家和你的宠物一起来看展。那么也请我们 John 先生 ，We follow the routine。那么你如果带你的狗狗来看的话啊，非常有意思，就是你可以让他们也看看，哎，他们的同类如果拍成这样的大片，会是什么样的一种场景啊？但是呢，要提醒各位的是，由于这个来看展的这个观众啊，可能人数会比较多，那么可能要先进行一个预约，同时呢，也要保证好你的狗狗不会影响到其他的这些观众们来看展。更多的信息呢，也可以在官方网站上来做一个确认。Okay, so let's carry on. Here we see 5 photos.
Right, sort of a group set here, and it looks like there's 4 dogs in there. It's hard to tell exactly, though. So, as I was saying before, Faye gave birth to a family of 4, which Bill, or three children, and they would be sort of the core group that would be in all of the photos. And so, every photo shoot that would happen, all the dogs would come. And so a lot of the classic work, which we'll get to in a little bit, you know, is maybe 1 dog, 2 dogs, but these kind of went into, it's kind of an anomaly in terms of the rest of the work, more of a formal kind of piece, but sort of haphazard at the same time. You know, it looks like a crowd scene or a street scene or something like that, and a little bit chaotic, but still, you know, there's a balance between them, between the way the dogs, and I love the way the light catches their ears and everything, you know, so they're really beautiful objects that way, but kind of a different approach to a lot of the other singular pieces.
我想我们看直播的观众现在很想看看刚才 John 所提到的这个狗狗，它头发上这个毛发上面的这些光泽感啊，因为它有灯光照射的关系，然后呢还有这些狗狗的神情，也请我们的摄像老师呢能够近一点的再来给大家看一看这些作品。那同时呢，我们再继续问问题啊。John, can you tell us, is it quite difficult to taking this kind of photo with 4 dogs or 5 dogs in one shot?
Yes, definitely. The camera is huge. It has to be moved around a lot, and of course they're moving on set, you know, the whole time, and so there was a little bit of serendipity to these where we would sort of frame it up, but there's a delay always in the time that you finish looking to frame the picture and compose it. A door has to be closed, a lens has to be closed, the film has to be brought down, so there might be 15-20 seconds between the time that we've sort of okayed what the shot is and the time that the shot actually happens. And so in that amount of time, you know, lots of things can go wrong on the set. The dogs might move, you can see they're kind of crowding each other, that sort of thing. And so, but Bill kind of embraced the sort of chaos of that moment, and so there's kind of this really lovely sort of just, you know, formality out of chaos, I think, in this particular shot, you know, or series of shots.
Yeah, but I think for the audience, it's the beauty of this creation.
Yes, definitely, yeah. And I love always the way that one of the beautiful things about the Weimaraners is the way that their fur captured the light and the way the light flowed over their fur. I mean, it really is a beautiful situation.
Yeah, it's like the water wave.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
yeah.
So now let's move on to this part. Yeah. Here we see 2 classic and then 2 modern.
Exactly, right. And so it's a nice juxtaposition because, you know, when this camera was invented in the late 70s, most photographers made pictures that were 8 by 10 or 11 by 14 inches. I don't have it in centimeters, but it's, you know, smaller. And so when this happened, suddenly you've got images that are not only very large, but also in color, instant. So it was kind of revolutionary at the time, because nobody had been doing work like this. And so, fast forward maybe 25 years before digital finally came in. And of course, very high resolution cameras, the sharpness and everything certainly rivals what the Polaroid did. But at the time that the Polaroid came out, nothing looked like this. I mean, it's just because the way the Polaroid works, you have a negative, you have a positive. And so the negative image just goes right over to the positive. So it's like what we call a contact print. If you go back to the history of photography where someone might shoot an 8x10 negative, they would lay it onto the piece of paper. So there's no enlarging happening. So this is a direct size of the image. Call it direct magnification. Comes out of the camera that size. So there's no loss of sharpness or detail or anything from an enlarging process. Digital kind of is its own sort of animal in terms of that, because it's a much different way. Analog versus digital, you have, the image is digitized into ones and zeros, and then it's translated back out to the print and everything. So very, very complex, actually, in terms of this one. These, he would shoot, you would edit, you might retouch, and then you would finally print. And so it would take maybe a day or two. I mean, no one would do what we did here, which is to create a final piece of art in 90 seconds. So there's a huge difference in terms of the creation act itself. Very different from what digital is. I mean, I love the digital. I use digital all the time, but of course my heart is with the analog process and what it means, and not only in the history of photography, but just in terms of image making in general.
Okay, so let's go to this space. Actually, we see a lot of recreation in this space. For example, this one. Yeah. What happened? Okay, please stand here. Yeah. Okay, so what happened with this one?
It's a pretty funny piece. Bill would sometimes shoot pictures, and because they're so realistic, when you cut them out and put them in another photo, it almost looked like it was the real dog itself. And so he would do that. I'm not sure where the missing cutout went. Could be in another photo. It's not here, obviously. And so kind of very typical Bill. He came out of the 1960s as an artist, very conceptual sort of thing, and so he decided to, all right, I've got this empty frame, but it looks pretty cool. I'm going to make that a final piece as well. So there you go, a picture of a dog with no dog in it. Yeah.
But I will encourage the audience, especially the visitors coming from Shanghai, with the dog. Maybe they can raise up a little bit with their dog and then take another photo here. 我会建议大家啊，如果你是真的是跟狗狗来的话，这张照片你可以把你的狗狗放在这个位置，看看是不是也可以跟大师的作品一起来做一个合影。比如说我的脑袋在这边啊，也可以试试看。好 ，Okay. So for this space, actually we see all of them, or no, half of them are classic piece, and some of them are recreate. For this one, like. It only has the nose.
It's just a nose, so this would have been I don't know if it was a piece of fabric. It's very dark there, so it's just a little hole cut out and the nose coming through. So there is a full dog behind that, so it's just you just have the small little piece there.
So this is the recreation that we talk about. And then this one, we see the eyes are different.
Right, little tack-on eye on Bettina there, so it kind of harks back to surrealism. Jean Cocteau and other artists from the 20s and 30s. So Bill would often reference some other eras of historical art eras, and doing things. Not always obvious to people, but that's what that is.
Okay, so these photos they are from these photos they are took in.
Yeah, quite a bit of the show is probably the mid-90s or so. But there also are some from the 80s. I started working with Bill in 1981. And he had a different dog in the beginning, and then he got a new dog, Fay Ray, in 1986. That also coincided with the time we moved to New York City from Boston. And so that really changed the whole program there, because now suddenly we were where all the artists were, whereas before they would have to come up to Boston to work. And so that really ushered in an era where a lot of artists, particularly like Bill, would work very frequently, almost every month, for years and years and years. And we would also then take the camera on location many times. He has a home up in Rangeley, Maine, which is up near the Canadian border. And we would often go for 2-3 weeks during the summer and shoot outdoors with it, which is none of those pictures are here, unfortunately. But so we shot under a whole huge variety of different conditions and everything. So this is a little more controlled, most of the studio work here.
Okay, so maybe next time when you had an exhibition, you can bring those photos in. Let's go out and then see this area. This area is actually my favorite area because the solo photos, they look like the drama.
Yeah.
Right?
They're sort of theater pieces, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I also want, it's nice here to point out to the audience, there are generations of dogs here. So this is Fay Ray behind you here. So she, Bill got her in 1986, and then she had a litter of puppies, I think around 1990. That's the year my daughter was born, so I'm pretty sure it was there. It might have been a little bit later, but anyway. So he kept 2 of the dogs himself, Batty and Chundo, and then a friend of his, Dave, kept one of the other dogs, Crookies. So there was like a team of 4 dogs that would be the stars of the theater piece for many, many years, for instance. And so like the piece that we saw earlier, the group shot, that's probably the 4 of them there. But Fay was certainly the main star in the beginning. And she was really great at balancing things. She kind of loved a challenge. She was a real hard worker. She was really into it. They would stay on set to everything, because all the dogs, we all have to shoot on a table, right? Because the camera's sort of high. You don't point down on the floor, and you don't get down on the floor with it. So they were always up on a table, raised up. So she would just stay there in between and everything. But holding the pose like that, you could almost see like the concentration in her face when she's looking, that she's actually working very hard to balance those sort of things. It's not that easy to do, even for a human, let alone a dog. And so
that's why she becomes the favorite model.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, she is my favorite dog, I have to say, although I do love them all. But Fay is certainly got the most special place in my heart in all the dogs. That
when you see the face expression,
yeah,
you can actually see her acting skill is quite...
Right, yeah. Right. Yeah, and here she's sort of getting a little on in age. You see she's starting to gray around the muzzle and everything. So she's a little bit older here. But. Yeah.
But do you have any accident when you actually take the photos?
Well, I guess you could call it an accident.
Challenge.
Yeah. So Bill, mostly worked on his own. He just generated his own ideas and wasn't really working for anyone. It was just really to create fine art pieces. But sometimes he would take a commission. And one time we did a commission for the London Times Sunday magazine piece. And so it was to shoot all these very high-end jewelry. Harry Winston, I'm not a jewelry person, but I remember that name, worth hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so in one particular shot, Bettina had balanced on top of her head like a $250,000 necklace. And so everything was fine, balancing kind of the way Fay would. But as soon as the flash went off and the shot was over, she just took it and flung it back, and it went flying in the air. And I thought the people that were from the jewelers were going to have a heart attack there. So, and that's Batty, who is right here. So this is the daughter of Fay. Yeah, she's the jewelry flinger, if you will, there. And this is also kind of an interesting piece. This one here. In that, a lot of times we'd have a lot of different clients that would come in. And I had another artist named David Leventhal who did this huge project on Barbie. He did a book on it and everything, and then its exhibit. And so he would sometimes leave the props in the studio. And I would always warn other artists. I said, don't leave anything. If you don't want Bill to use your props and his pictures, don't leave them here. And so he didn't really care. And so sure enough, Bill found it in the closet, and before you know it, he's using it for this there. So I love this one. This is
Barbie's house.
Barbie's house with a giant dog in it there, and you can see Barbie's. I'm not quite sure if she's happy about it or horrified by it. It's hard to tell from her expression there, right?
Yeah, every photo has a story.
It does.
Right?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's go forward. So those are the solos as well, right?
And then we start to move into younger generations of dogs also. So this, I think, is Bobbin, who trying to do the lineage there. So Fay begat Batty, who begat Chip, who then sired a litter on which Bobbin came out of. And so I believe that's Bobbin. And so, over the course of 15, 20 years, we had 2 full generations of dogs. And then later on, Bill got another dog, Penny, who wasn't in the lineage, but still, became part of the family there. So we adopted her, I guess you could say there. So, and this is the male dog, Chundo, who also the child of Fay. And then we move into lots of Bettina sort of thing, younger ones. And then when they're all wrapped up, it's hard to tell who it is, but yeah, so this has been great for me because I haven't seen a lot of these originals since the day they were made, because you know, what would happen when we work with an artist, they would, you know, we'd pack up the work and they'd take it home and back to their studio, and I'd never see them again, you know, maybe in a book or something. So for me, it's just a real treat to see the originals again. You know, I can kind of just remember back in those days, the early 90s, back in New York and everything. So for me, it's kind of a little bit of a nostalgic trip to take this little tour with you.
I think Mr. Wegman and also you would love to take these dogs like a person, like a friend.
Oh, totally, yeah. I mean, they really, the personality, each dog had their own personality too, which is kind of funny. There's a little video that I did of Bill where he sort of mimics their expressions, like Faye is very stern and Batty's like, I don't care, and then Chundo's like, what? You know, and then the other one, Crookie, was very high energy, so she was like, blah, 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 like that sort of thing. So they all had, you know, and Bill would kind of use those skills for the kind of shot that he would want to do, you know. So Faye was great at balancing objects. Batty was very fluid, was almost like acrobatic in the things that she would do. She was like a rubber dog. You could pour her almost and things. And Chundo, very big and strong and everything, so he would take on the sort of the classic male roles and everything. And then Crookie was Batty's sister, so often the two of them would be together. In fact, Bill did a film of them called the Hardley Boys, which had two females as the role. So it was like a half-hour film of them doing adventures up in Maine together. You know, it's the classic sort of American book on the Hardley Boys. So.
那这个展览呢，其实我们在直播过程当中啊，希望给大家看到的只是几个作品，因为呢，我们还是希望大家能够真的是身临其境的来到这个外滩，来到复兴艺术中心，来亲身体验一下，看看这些狗狗们啊，他们被创作出来的作品是什么样子。那接下来呢，我们相信我们的摄像老师啊，先往前走，我们要回到原来刚刚一开始啊，带大家进入的那个空间，我们去好好的看一看创作出这些作品的那个大大的20×24画幅的照相机究竟是长什么样子的？也请 John 呢来给我们解析一下它当中的运行的这个诀窍都有哪些。我听说啊，全世界只有6台这样的机器，到目前为止还能够正常的工作，所以是非常稀缺的。我相信有很多的摄影爱好者也想知道啊，它是怎么工作的。So John, let's go back and then to see the camera make these photos.
Okay.
So why do you choose Shanghai as the first stop to showcase this camera?
It's where Jesse is, our friend Jesse, you know, who contacted me, I think first in 2019, just via email. They said, we are a group of photographers in Shanghai. We're very interested in, we love your process. We'd very much like to have a camera in Shanghai. Can we talk? And I said, well, okay, sure. And I didn't, you know, I get a lot of approaches like that. People come in all the time, and then nothing ever happens from it, right? So I kind of didn't think that much about it, and then he came back to me more serious, and he says, we want to bring you to Shanghai to show you we are serious and to show you our beautiful city and introduce you to artists and that sort of thing. So I came in January of 2020, right before COVID started, you know, so did all that. We didn't really know what was going on and everything, and I left, I think, on January 19th, and I think the parts of the country started closing down on the 23rd or so. And so I get back home and I'm thinking, all right, well, they're going to be busy for a while with this problem. They're having no idea that the whole world was going to be turned upside down and everything. And so that was a problem, and it caused a lot of delays, but Jesse never gave up. And so it took 4 years to really get this to come. And so now we're finally seeing the fruit bearing from that process of it happening here in Shanghai. And now the next step is to have Chinese artists start to do work similar or different or whatever with the camera and really make it, you know, a Chinese instrument. So
can I call it the first tryout outside of the States?
No, there's been European cameras, and there have been cameras in Asia before. There was a camera in Japan off and on in the 80s and maybe into the 90s. I've been to Japan 3 times for Polaroid, first in '83, long time ago, and then in 2001 and 2003. So, but nothing since then. So it's been over 20 years since that happened. And of course, we all thought Polaroid was going away, right? I mean, the company, the original company went bankrupt in 2008. The reason we're still here and why we're able to do this today is I got together with an investor through one of my clients, Elsa Dorfman, who allowed us to buy a large amount of film from the original Polaroid before they went away. So we did that. So we've been taking care of that and keeping it and spooling it and making the reagent as we go. Well, maybe we'll talk about that, the film, once we get over to the camera.
Okay.
And so that allowed us to continue. And so it's been a rocky road since then. It's not the same as being as part of a big company like Polaroid. We're sort of on our own. We're a very small company, but we're able to do it. And so this is a new version of the camera. Polaroid built 5 cameras in the 70s in the original factory at Polaroid. So they had their own metalworking and woodworking shops. There was probably a team of maybe 25 or 30 people that worked on those machines back then. This particular one is built by one person, a guy named Tracy Storr in California. His company is called Mammoth Camera. And he actually, believe it or not, one person built this camera. Now he does go out to outside vendors to do some of the, the more sophisticated like water jet work and computer generated design stuff. But for the most part, this is a machine that is hand built by one person, which is extraordinary. And you can see there's so many parts, and every part has to be made. This has to be made. These have to be made. These are sort of stock parts, but all these things from here, all this has to be made. These are not off-the-shelf parts at all. They all have to be machined, and generally they have to be either anodized, which is how they get black like that, or powder-coated sometimes. So it's a very complicated process to build one of these cameras. And that's just the camera part of it. Inside, there's a very sophisticated system for processing the film and everything, and that has all kinds of very tiny, small, sophisticated parts in it. So
this is the film that you will talk about?
Yes, this is the film. Let me grab it.
Oh. Be careful.
I don't want to clock my head, right?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay. So, if everybody's familiar with old-fashioned Polaroid, I don't know many people are still alive like me, who, when I was a child, that was my Polaroid, where my dad had a camera where you pull the film out and you wait 60 seconds and you peel the picture apart. Most people who are familiar with instant film probably know Fuji more than they know Polaroid, but we call that film integral, meaning that you don't peel it apart. And so the idea, when Polaroid made it, was that there's no trash, because when you peel it away, you throw the negative away. And so you had litter problems and all that kind of thing. Plus it's messy and everything. So the whole idea in the invention of integral film, or SX70 as it was called, was to reduce the clutter and make it much simpler. So you didn't have to do anything. And the picture comes out and you just wait for it to develop up. So this is the old-fashioned material. And so this material was coated by Polaroid in 2006. And so this is the negative. And so, the classic of photography, if you think about analog photography, let's say black and white, you have a negative that you would put in a 35mm camera. You would process it in the darkroom and everything. You would dry it and everything. And then you would put it in an enlarger, and then you would, print it to a piece of paper. Paper goes into chemical. So a very complicated process, right? So we still have the same thing. So this is the negative, and this would be the final print. So this is negative, we call this positive. And so what happens is inside the camera, this rolls down in the back, and through this lens, the light strikes the negative, and then it goes and it meets the positive, which is at the bottom of the camera, between 2 rollers. And then the third component is a chemical packet that we call a pod, and it has the developer in it. It's actually not called developer, it's called reagent, but similar to developer. So then there's a motor inside, and it breaks open that chemical packet through the rollers, and the film will exit out the bottom of the camera, and then we cut it off with a knife, and then we put it on a table, and we wait for it to develop. Now it takes a little longer. It takes about 2.5 minutes. It used to take 90 seconds. Now a little bit longer, I think because the film is older. And then you peel it apart, and then you have your final picture. So pretty complicated process, very slow. Not only is the shooting part of it there, so imagine, like we were talking before about the 5-part piece with all the dogs on there. So imagine a table like right here, and all the dogs are right here. And so I'm trying to look through the back, and they're kind of rustling around, they're moving around, they're hitting each other, and everything. So I'm trying to frame all that. And then at a certain point, we say, all right, that's the picture. So what happens is the lens has to be closed because, to keep the light from coming in right there. And then the back of the camera is closed, then the film has to be brought down. And then we also have to then start the process there. I think Jesse just walked in with the pods right now, so perfect timing, Jesse. Why don't you come over here for a second? And let me hand these off to you.
好，那刚才我们 John 一直都提到的这位 Jesse 先生啊，他现在是把这个另外一个工作的配件交到了 John 的手中。John, can you move on to the camera side?
Sure. So these packets contain the reagent that I was talking about. And so we use 2 of these for every picture. And so what happens is there's a liquid in each of these chambers. and they will sit. Let's say these are rollers here. So they'd be right on top of the rollers. And so the negative is coming down and the positive is already at the bottom. They meet together. And what happens is they get pulled through the rollers, and these packets are designed to break under pressure. So when the rollers start to move, it actually squeezes them and pops them, kind of like a mustard packet. You know, how like if you stepped on a mustard, it would squeeze out, right? So these squeeze out, and then it spreads between the two rollers and in between the positive and the negative. And then what happens is a very fascinating process. It's called diffusion transfer. So not only is the negative, it has silver coated in there, there's dyes developed. It's a very complex series of chemicals and coatings on this piece of film. What happens is the dyes then migrate across to the positive. And so that happens over the course of the development time. And then when you peel it apart, the dyes are all there. So seems simple, but it's an incredibly complex process. And it's a miracle that it worked way back then, and it's a miracle that it still works today.
Well, after you explain how it works, it makes me feel like this big camera is coming from the museum. How many cameras? I heard that there are only 6 of these kind of cameras can still work.
The original Polaroid camera made 5 cameras in 1977 and 78. And then Mammoth Camera, who makes these, I think this is the 4th camera he's made. And so that would give you 9 cameras total.
Okay, so last question. What kind of feedback do you expect to see in Shanghai in this exhibition from the audience side?
That's a really great question. It's hard to know. I mean, I think one of the great things about Bill's work is how accessible it is, because it's dogs. You know, everyone loves dogs and everything. And so it can allow people to kind of get an entry into the fine art qualities of this. So you start appreciating the animals. You love animals and everything. But then you start thinking, wow, this kind of looks like an oil painting from the Renaissance. You know, that it's very formal. It has these qualities of arrangement of things. So it's serious art at the same time that it's very accessible art. And I think that's really the beauty of William Wegman's work.
Okay, thank you, John. Thank you. 那么正在看直播的各位观众啊，如果您接下来呢也有兴趣到这个非常特别的最佳模特的展览来看一看的话呢，我相信啊你也会跟你的小宠物们一起度过一个非常美妙的沉浸在艺术世界里的午后。那在这个同时呢，大家也可以到外滩啊，因为整个外滩艺术季啊，不仅有这样的一个最佳模特的展览，同时呢在场外还有很多的本土的艺术家，他们创作了跟宠物有关的一些大型的装置，大家也可以一起去看一下。那我们今天的直播呢就到这里结束了，谢谢各位。